All right, guys, so we are going to be diving into poetry here. Excited to do this with you. Couple of things. So the first thing is we're going to go over some terms and techniques. Today's goal is really just to kind of get familiar with poetry, okay? So we have some notes that are also at Google Classroom for you. This is what they look like. These we had printed for you at school, but of course we can't give those to you now. We were going to put them in our notebook. So I suggest you can print these. You can put them in your notebook if you would like. Or if not, you can just pick a color and maybe annotate as we go, or go back and annotate these later. But these are just things that you maybe want to refer to as we do our poetry unit, okay? So the first thing that we're going to be looking at is our poetic techniques. So these are things that you'll see in a poem. And as you can see, our rainbow, right? It adds color to our poems. So the first one is called meter. Now here we have our definition and then some examples. So meter is rhythm in a poem. And that's really all you need to know. The fancy definition is the intentional use of stressed and unstressed syllables. Again, we don't need to get into that. Really, meter is when you hear or read something that kind of has rhythm to it. We see this so much in songs, and poetry as well. So for instance, I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them. Sam, I am. You kind of just hear that rhythm when you read that out loud, right? So that's going to be meter, is just kind of creating that rhythm within a line or a couple of lines of writing, okay? All right, so the next one is iamb, and we're going to go over this really quick. It looks like lamb, but it's really an iamb. And this one is something that we don't really need to know a lot in 6th grade, but just for your information, it's a specific type of meter that uses stressed and unstressed syllables. So again, it creates rhythm, but it does it a little bit more intentionally. And again, you don't need to really know too much about this. All we need to know is that Shakespeare uses this a lot, and like that's really it for this, okay? So here we can see, like, I think I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree. And as you read that again, we can kind of hear that rhythm. You can count syllables, nothing too fancy we need to know yet. All right, so the next one is rhyme scheme, and I bet that you have done this before. So rhyme scheme is something we will do with our poems. It's when you look at the last word in each line of a poem, and then we're going to label it with a letter of the alphabet, looking for rhyme, right? So for instance, true friends are always by your side. We're going to put an A there, right? Through it all inside do not rhyme. So I'm going to put a B, a new letter. True friends are there. Does that rhyme with all or side? No, it does not. So again, I'm going to put a new letter there, C. To catch you when you fall. Wait, fall rhymes with all, so that's going to be B. So this is when we go through and we do, again, different rhymes, and we'll have some examples to look at that are more concrete in a minute. But yeah, this kind of just helps you see how a poem is rhyming at the end of each line. So that's going to be rhyme scheme, okay? Next, we have free verse. So this is a poem that does not follow any sort of like form or have a rhyme scheme or meter or any of those things. A lot of what you probably see and read is free verse, or maybe you write as well. But it's just poems that kind of do their own thing. So this one's called Fog by Carl Sandburg. The fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent haunches and then moves on. So there's really no rhythm there. There's no rhyme. But it's a really cool poem, right? It kind of talks about that fog and comparing it to that cat. So it's just an option that you have as a writer and as a reader to talk about poetry kind of in a different way. Okay? All right. Next one is called couplet. So this is 2 lines of poems that rhyme together. They often come at the end of a poem, and usually Shakespeare uses these. Again, he's very poetic, as we have learned in Julius Caesar, so we'll see this a lot, okay? So here we have, once I dive in these pages, I may not come out for ages. Again, if they're 2 lines that rhyme together, right there, boom, that's a couplet. Books have powers over me. Inside a book, I am not free. Again, so those rhymes, that's going to be a couplet, okay? So anytime you see 2 lines that rhyme together, think of a couplet. All right, and then just a few more, guys, that you may need to know when we go into poetry here. Tone is the attitude that's implied by the speaker of a poem. We've talked about this in class, right? Like, don't you take that tone with me. Tone are words that we describe like attitudes with, right? So maybe you have a poem that could be, lighthearted, or maybe it's a little bit sad, or that kind of thing. That's what tone is looking at. Voice, so this is characteristics displayed by the narrator or whoever is speaking. So we can talk about the voice of the poem being whatever we hear or see from that person that's speaking in the poem. Okay, and then stanza is a group of lines that are in a poem. So you guys will see that, and again, some of the examples we're going to study together in a little bit. Today we're just kind of learning these terms, going through them. Okay, And then a couple other things that you need to know. Remember, we have connotation and denotation. You may need to know those terms for some things that we'll do later in the week. So remember, connotation is what you feel, and then denotation, dictionary. And we have our little dance for that, but that's just words that you might see. And then finally, guys, we have our figurative language, and we should know these. We practice these a lot, but just some reminders. So simile uses compares two things using like or as. Metaphor compares two things but does not use like or as, right? Personification is when we give human qualities to something that is not. So like the tree, the tree I guess could be living, right? But we could say like the wind danced through the tree or something like that. Hyperbole is an extreme exaggeration. This is absolutely the 100 most best video I've ever watched in my entire life. Hopefully that's not an exaggeration, but it is. Onomatopoeia, words that imitate sounds, right? So bang, boom, crash. And then alliteration, when we pick a consonant and repeat that at the beginning of a sentence. So the tree tomorrow took taffy. I don't know, something like that, right? Okay, cool. So guys, those are the terms. You might want to pause this video, go back, annotate those notes that I showed you at the beginning, just so you have these. The next step is going to be looking at a little bit of what poetry looks like, and you'll have a Quizlet on these terms just to be familiar. Don't need to be the master of these by any means, but just some kind of ways to get you started on our week of poetry here.